Howdy, folks. Happy, what day is it, Russ?
I'm not saying. If you don't know, you probably become the same as Eichel.
I'm doing an homage to Eck. Happy Tuesday, folks. We have Joe Yurden joining us. Good morning or good afternoon, Joe.
I hope it's not morning anymore.
It's morning on the West Coast. Yes. But Russ, start us off with the pre-show.
All right, this is a slow clap for my old stomping grounds, New York, for basically canceling Bob Baffert and all his horses. Good for them. He can no longer run any of his horses for any of these races, the Belmont. He can't run them for Aqueduct, none of them. And I just felt like this was kind of amazing to me because, you know, a drug test comes in and his horse was still able to run in the Preakness while we're awaiting everything else, while we know that, you know, who knows what's going on behind the scenes with shenanigans and everything else. And I'm glad New York took this step because if nothing else, now historically, he is going to have to deal with this question for the rest of his life because he could say it's cancel culture and he could say, oh, but it was the hay that was peed on, which is a ridiculous story. But now he can't get out of this.
Well,
this is great.
What was the giveaway? The needle sticking out of the horse's ass around the final turn? But the problem is this is not permanent. This is not.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be permanent.
I know, but I mean, okay, so yeah, but I don't follow horse racing as much as I used to. But a lot of these trainers, they deal with things like this all the time, and it doesn't. You know, I hope it leaves a stink on Baffert because he's been, I think, the worst of them. But I don't know whether it will. I mean, if he's cleared, which it's possible that he's cleared, even though we probably know that he's been cheating.
Look, Mike, he's doing his own investigation like OJ. Like it's just maybe he gets cleared, maybe he doesn't.
So maybe he finds the killer before OJ does.
Maybe he does. Maybe he does that better investigation than OJ. But what this does do, though, is this is New York basically saying there's an issue with your horses and we don't want them running here right now while there's an issue. And I think that's great.
Well,
that does send the right message.
Well, this prevents him from running in the Belmont because he finished first in the Kentucky Derby. It's under appeal right now, or I guess they're doing the second test. At least I haven't heard that the results of the second test came through. He finished third.
I don't think he did yet.
Yeah, he finished third in the Preakness, so he's not going to win the Triple Crown. But he, after finishing in first and third, he might have run in the Belmont, but he's not going to run now. So.
And I do want to answer to those people, and Joe, you can comment too if you want, but to the people that are like, oh, we get robbed of a chance of a Triple Crown. How about to the poor horse that gets drugged, that has no idea what's going on to him? Does anybody worry about the horse ever? That's all.
No. And yeah, I think New York doing this, it also cuts into his chance to win more money at Belmont. But also, if it's held up through the summer, he can't go to Saratoga either.
Right.
Which, you've got the Travers Stakes in August, which is the big one after the Belmont, after the three big races. And then, we'll see what happens in November with the Breeders' Cup. But that's in California or Florida or something. Yeah. So I mean, listen, the guy's won a ton, but it's like Brady with the football thing where you're just kind of like, is this the way it goes? Although granted, this is a lot more serious. Football's being deflated. Who cares?
It's not as serious as this.
But drugging horses to win races, man, come on. Horse racing's pretty abysmal as it is.
It is.
And if you're drugging horses and, their lives are basically threatened every race, man, get lost.
Yeah.
Now, I know this will bring joy and excitement to Russ and also Joe and I, but for different reasons. They had ESPN just announced a 6-part documentary series on the captain, Derek Jeter, and the series will be called The Captain. Now, what I'm curious here, Joe, and I'll ask you this first since you're a Yankees fan, is whether Derek Jeter will get the same control over the documentary series that Michael Jordan did on The Last Dance, whether the higher ups at ESPN, being a bunch of Boston honks, will not give that to him, and whether it'll be a hit piece. Now, I don't think if he agreed to it, then I don't think it'll be a hit piece. But what do you think of this?
Well, the person directing it is a pretty diehard New York person, so okay. I'm not too worried about the hit piece part of that. I mean, that stuff just comes from them being based in Hartford. But as far as the control part, yeah, I expect him to. I expect it's going to be just like the Last Dance with Jordan, where nothing too scandalous is going to get through, and anything that was remotely scandalous is going to get painted over. I don't know how they can avoid discussing the gift basket.
No, things. That's all they're going to do, though. They're just going to get over with that quickly. But as an example,
he dated a lot of famous women.
Yeah, I was going to say, like that's something he's going to actually be ashamed of. It's like, okay, I dated Scarlett Johansson. I dated oh God, what's the girl's name?
He's not going to talk about
Jordana
that.
Brewster.
Jordana Brewster.
He's not going to talk about that. He will not. He is extremely private.
Jessica Alba.
He is like Michael Jordan. He's extremely private. The Jordan stuff, we never heard enough about the gambling while the series was going on with the Knicks in Atlantic City. Why? Gee, I wonder why. And there's plenty of stuff with Derek Jeter that the newspapers buried forever that we will never hear about as sports fans, because if you just went through that whole Derek Jeter period, and I'm not saying he's a bad guy, he's a good guy, but there was never a bad story once in his whole Yankee career, and that's ridiculous.
And you know who was the scarcest presence in The Last Dance was Michael Jordan's ex-wife. I think the only time her face appeared on the entire I think it was 9-part documentary series was when he retired from basketball and he was going to play baseball, and she was sitting on the dais with Reinsdorf and him. That was the only time you saw. She wasn't interviewed. That was it. Now,
actually, and I didn't watch all 9 parts because I couldn't subject myself to a ridiculous farcical series like that. But was Bill Cartwright in there?
Yes.
He was? Okay.
Yeah.
But I was curious.
I don't remember Dave Corzine being in there, but yeah, Cartwright was in it, but not very much.
Because he was there for the young, selfish Michael Jordan when Jordan wasn't winning and was trying to tell Doug Collins what to do with the team. That's why I was curious how much Bill Cartwright was in it.
I mean, I might be misremembering here, but I seem to remember him showing up very briefly early on. And yeah, that was it. But wasn't he an assistant coach for the Bulls too?
Afterwards, yeah.
Yeah.
And then everybody signed on for Jordan after that. But I'm saying, remember the early struggles they had as a team, because they used to play the Knicks a lot when they were having those early struggles. And whatever. But last thing, I would love to be a Major League Baseball player. But if it takes getting hit in the face with a 92 mile per hour fastball to get an RBI, I'm out.
Yeah, I
you
know.
can get an RBI on the play, but I'm out.
Hard pass.
Yeah, but that's the only way that Kevin Pillar can get a hit.
That's really mean, Mike. The guy got hit with a 92 mile an hour fastball in the face.
Hello, Hockey World.
You just look that way.
Today is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021.
I'm Russ Cullen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. And as I said, we welcome Joe Yerdon to the show. Joe, we want to start with some not exactly breaking news with the Sabres, but there was a tweet from Darren Brager regarding the Buffalo Sabres coaching search. Now, Don Granato took over from Ralph Kruger at the halfway mark of the season, had a much better record. At least after that 18-game losing streak, I think they went about 500 after that finally finished up. And in the exit interviews, which I watched a lot of the players, young and old alike, were basically saying good things about Granato and the way he approached the remainder of the season. And Kevin Adams left. Essentially Kevin Adams says, we laid out a process when we hired Don Granato. We're following that process. That's all he really said. He didn't elaborate much. He said he's going to be a candidate, but he didn't go further on that. Now, Drager really didn't break any news in the sense that he says he remains a primary candidate, but he did say that Kevin Adams is talking to a number of college coaches. What have you heard about this process?
Well, the college coach thing was something that was assumed after Ralph Kruger was fired, that eventually that was the route the Sabres were going to take a hard look at. Guys like Nate Lehman at Providence, Greg Carvel at UMass, and Scott Sandelin at Minnesota Duluth. Those are the three names that really came up a lot. And
Sandelin's got a massive contract years-wise.
Yeah, it came after he ironically won the national title in Buffalo, where it was, where he was going to be a hot name, and Minnesota was like, nope, you're going to stay right here. So, good on them. But I mean, if you have designs of becoming a pro coach at some point, you can walk away from a contract because
but I'll tell you what, Sandelin has told people behind the scenes, that kind of deal is more what he wants than a quick shot at the NHL, because if it doesn't work, he's now lost security. With this deal that he's got, he's got all the security.
Yeah, I mean, there is that aspect too. I mean, there's been situations in the past where a guy will get interviewed for a job that's looked as a step up, or he'll be in consideration for it, and it gets used as leverage to get a better deal where they're at, which, hey, I mean, if they want to keep that coach around, they're like, all right, we'll pay you. Like, I can respect the hustle, like, believe me. But I think in this case, these were guys that were on Adams' list anyways. I think there was discussion before. It was after there's so many coaches. I don't know if it was after Housley was fired or if it was after Bilesman was fired. It might have been after Housley that Nate Lehman was a guy that they had some interest in.
Yeah, after Housley.
Yeah, so it's like I said, all time and all losing just runs together. Yes. So Lehman was a guy under consideration. Obviously, UMass is a red hot program right now. And I think a lot of people have taken Carvel's ability to coach and his ability to evaluate talent, considering he was able to get, Cale Makar to play at UMass when, lo and behold, nobody was really searching out that part of Alberta to find him. So, but like, I look at that as if you're going that route for a coach, and I think you can put Granato under that header as well. Because he's always been more of a developmental coach. I know he was an assistant with Quenneville in Chicago, but but if you're going that route, that screams that you're gonna pull things apart and start over. If you're bringing in a guy like that, because
I agree with that, what you're saying, and that's I went on a rant with Mike, and I'll give you the quick version of the rant here. The first part of it is, if they don't bring in John Tortorella to interview, they are doing their fans a disservice. That's the first thing. Okay. The second thing is, and I think this is the bigger disservice that they're doing, if in the next year and a half they trade Eichel, Ristolainen, and Reinhart, no matter what the return is, they will be the Jacksonville Jaguars of the NHL for another 3 to 5 years. Okay. Doesn't matter how good the coaching will be. It doesn't matter how good the GMing will be, because at the end of the day, all they're doing is just shuffling deck chairs and Russian prospects. And until they change that mentality, things are going to continue like this.
Well, let me just ask you this, Joe, because I don't agree with Russ regarding Tortorella, because I think that there is a financial component to the Sabres and their coaching. So, I mean, there's obviously a financial component with Kevin Adams. I know that the Pagulas want direct control of hockey operations. That's why they've been hesitant to hire a team president. They want Kim Pagula directly, Terry and Kim Pagula directly to Kevin Adams. They don't want a buffer. Okay. They still have to pay Kruger for next year. They still have to pay Jason Botterill for next year. I don't think that they will even go down the road of talking to veteran coaches, because they know those guys are going to cost upwards of $3, maybe $4 million a year. And I don't think they want to pay that.
Part of me, that goes to what happened, the discussion that happened last summer, where I forget who it said. It might have been Frank Saravalli said that the Sabres were going to operate on a budget in regards to the salary cap being somewhere around 70 million. And everybody in Buffalo panicked and said, "Oh, how are you going to do that? I don't know. You can't build a team that way." And it's like, yeah, I get it. But when it comes to the coaching thing, I mean, listen, I know they're frustrated. They're frustrated about all of this stuff. My worry here, and this is the same worry that Tim Graham from The Athletic had in a recent piece where he said and I 100% agree with this. The worry is they'll pick Don Granato not for the merit, but because they'll think they've already got it figured out, and they're like, "Aha, look, we've got our guy right here in house." And listen, the Pagulas are guilty of doing that already before. They did it with Ron Ralston. They didn't want to go on a big search after they had fired Lindy Ruff, and Ralston stepped in. He was an interim, and the Sabres did pretty well with him in charge. But at that point, you have to figure out whether is it him coaching or is it just the team rallying around not having the previous guy there anymore. And I think that's the hard question they got to really ask is, listen, all the players said a lot of very nice things about Ralph Krueger at the end of the year, but the way I sum those up is, it's the kind of things that you say when you don't want to knock the guy's job. You say these really nice, like, "Bye, he's a guy I'll have with, I'll cherish having in my life forever." But it's not saying anything about his coaching, how he was as a coach either.
Well, let me, before we move on and talk about the playoffs, I just want to because this is the first time we've talked to you since the end of season media availabilities and Jack Eichel sort of dropping a bomb with saying, there was a disconnect and things weren't black and white between him and the organization. And then Kevin Adams coming out and saying that the lines of communication were wide open. So, there was a sort of disconnect in the commentary there.
Yeah,
so you've got that, you've got Reinhart and Ristolainen basically saying in the final year before unrestricted free agency, well, I could stay or I could go. It really doesn't matter to me either way. I mean, what is your feel about how dramatic the changes are going to be with the Sabres before next season?
Well, when it comes to the Jack and Adams stuff, I think the truth lies somewhere in between.
Right.
Because I think you're getting a very one-sided view from each of them. I don't think you're necessarily getting an honest take on that from Adams. To say that the lines of communication were open and Jack saying the exact opposite. I mean, all I can do is think back to when Jack was injured in the middle of the season, and Ralph Krueger said, "Oh no, he was he got injured in practice and that." And then Jack comes back the next game and they said, "Oh, what happened in practice where you got hurt?" And he goes, "Well, I know I got hurt the last game."
Right.
Oh, okay. News to us.
And then even before that, we found out he was hurt in training camp and we didn't find out about that.
All of that was the start of what we would call poor communication, but Kevin Adams would say otherwise. That's true.
But that's like franchise wide communication when it comes to dealing with us. But I mean, when it's between GM and player, I don't know if the communication problem is that they're basically telling Jack, like, "Hey, listen, do this," and he's like, "No, this other doctor told me to do, like, this is the best way." And if that's where the problem lies, then I mean, listen, I think you have to take the player's what the player wants to do into consideration and take an honest look at it. But for Adams to come out and say, our doctors say to do this, and so do his doctors, so why don't you just listen to the doctors? To me, that says that bridge is not repairable, and that means he's going to be gone. And I think if he's gone, Sam Reinhart and Ristolainen see the handwriting on the walls, and they're going to be like, "No."
Right.
Ristolainen was brought in, the first time around to be part of the solution, and so was Reinhart. And they're like, "No."
Right. So let me, before we do the playoffs, the last thing. So that part that I said, that no matter what the return is, this seems to be a cycle, and I don't think Don Granato can break him out of this cycle if all those three guys leave again. I just don't.
Well, I think if you bring a guy like Tortorella in, is he going to want to deal with the ownership? Like, I can see him just being like, "Listen, I was already in a crazy show in Vancouver. I don't really know if I want to deal with this."
I mean, it depends. It depends if they say, "You could do whatever you want, John. We'll handle the finances. You handle the coaching." He might do that then. He might.
I mean, that's possible. But like, if he's the guy being brought in,
I would think
you can't do it without those main guys, because then you're basically asking him to captain a rebuild, and I don't know that he wants to do that.
No, he won't captain a rebuild. That's true.
I would think that Torts would want some sort of roster control, and I don't think that the organization wants to give anybody that other than.
But there is a point. This is what I said to Mike, Joe. There is a point when all owners who think they've had a handle on everything and find out 10, 20 years later that they don't, start giving in, because winning and making money does become an issue, especially with the Sabres now not selling tickets. But Mike doesn't think Pegula's at that point.
No, I don't. I agree with Mike. I don't think they're at that point at all. I mean, look at some of the moves, and I like to point out and say, even though we don't know for sure, I can look at some of these moves and say, that's not the GM doing it. And if I'm still able to do that now, if that happens this summer, I mean, it doesn't really strike me as a good sign for Kevin Adams, because if they're coming over the top of him to make decisions,
right,
that's bad, and that's that's going to continue everything.
And Russ, you have to factor in, they really, other than shaking hands and making phone calls, they have almost no input with the Buffalo Bills. None. It's the Bean and McDermott show. So this is their plaything, and they have control. And unless they're told by somebody, I don't know who the hell would tell them, they're not going to relinquish control. This is their plaything. They're gonna keep with it.
I'll tell you who would tell them, and Mike, this will set up an alarm bell for you because you've got a bias. But if you brought in someone as a consultant like a Scotty Bowman, even at this age, he would tell you directly that is exactly the problem. And I know you're going to default to the past.
Yeah, Scotty had a great effect in 1979, didn't he?
See, I knew that was going to happen, but I'm just saying, if you brought a guy like that in, and he would point to that, Joe, and he would say that directly, that's the only way it's going to happen.
Yuri Dudacek is doing wonders in the Czech Army right now.
Move on. Go to the playoffs.
Okay. Let's start with the playoffs. Start with what I thought was the most entertaining of the three games yesterday, and that was Game 2 of Bruins Capitals. Joe, I predicted this series was going to go 7. I thought the Bruins were going to win this, and I mean, we'll talk about the game itself, but the main concern, if you're a Capitals fan or somebody who has a vested interest in the Capitals, like somebody who drafted them in a playoff hockey pool, they're dropping like flies. I mean, first Vanacek pulls or tears a groin, whatever happened to him on the DeBrusque goal in Game 1. Then they, Kuznetsov and Samsonov were out due to COVID protocol or whatever the reason is. And then Lars Eller gets hurt last night. Their number 2 center was Nick Dowd at the end of the game. So they're in trouble.
Yeah, they're in big trouble, and they were in trouble heading into this with the Samsonov and Kuznetsov issue. So I don't like how this sets up for them. This is getting ugly. Now, that's not to say a Lavi team is gonna just roll over and die. They won't. Right. And any team with Oshie and Ovechkin and those guys, they're not going to roll over either. But this gets a lot harder, especially with the center issue. When you're dealing with Bergeron and Krejci, and even, you get down that lineup, even Sean Corrali, Curtis Lazar. I mean, those guys, they'll play tough up the middle. That's where things get dicey. And the one area the Bruins I think has a weakness is on defense. But man, they've been leaning so hard on McAvoy. They've been leaning so hard on him to make sure that they can steady that ship. This gets scary for the Caps. Blowing that game last night is not great for the confidence going into Boston.
It's interesting, Joe. The way that Craig Anderson started that game, he looked the most uncomfortable I've ever seen him in his career. And then he had a pretty good game. Mm-hmm. But I think as the series goes on, the lack of playing for him is going to show up in different spots. Every other day off, he's in a game where he hasn't been in a game in a long time, and this is a condensed schedule. And I just think that if the Bruins play the long game here, they're going to win the series just based on that. Now, if the Tuukka Rask haters can stay away long enough to realize how this guy keeps them in games, then those fans will be placated too.
Yeah, the Rask hating, just I cannot wrap my head around it for the life of me. And I know it's easier to do it with Swayman, who finished up the season so strong, backing him up. But like, my goodness, it's the playoffs, man. You gotta back the horse that brought you for the most part. And
I don't get it. It's like honestly, it's like, you could say I think there's more of a case and I don't think that there's as much Freddie Anderson hate in Toronto as there's Tuukka Rask hate in Boston, and the guy got them to a cup final.
It's irrational.
He was the main reason they got to a cup.
I think they're pushing the guy out of town. Honestly, I do. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like he's going to grow tired of it. There is slight breaking news that this will be worthy of talking about. Eric Engels, friend of the show, said that Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Cole Caulfield will not be playing in Game 1. Now, I'm going to harp on the Kotkaniemi one. If you don't want to play Cole Caulfield, fine. If you want him to watch a little bit, that's fine. Not everybody's like Chris Kreider and you throw him right in. But this is a guy that you drafted and rushed and said was going to be your number one center. Now Ducharme comes in, a different coach, and he's not playing in the first game of the playoffs. Like, this does show me that Montreal does want to play a very physical brand of hockey. Look, Kotkaniemi could throw his body around a little bit. I saw this year a little bit. I mean, more than he used to when he first got there. But this is crazy to not put this guy in there. I don't even know what the message is. I honestly don't.
It's a very screwy thing. Listen, I know Montreal fans are driven nuts by Eric Stahl being up there because he hasn't done anything. And Kotkaniemi is a guy that the fans adore, so that he's already got that going for him. But my goodness, you're going to need some speedy guys in that lineup. Like, you're not going to be able to bottle up the Leafs, for an entire game. You can't do it. They're too talented. They're too fast. So, good
Joe,
luck.
Who do you like better at this point in their career, Jake Evans or Eric Stahl?
Where are you going to get both of them?
Well, you're going to get both, but I like Jake Evans better. I'd give him more ice time than Eric Stahl at this point.
Yeah, I do, just because of the youth factor and the speed, but that's probably about it.
And he did a good job against McDavid. Maybe he does a good job against Matthews. As good as anybody.
Well, no, I mean, okay. Right now, the plan is Suzuki, Danault matching up against Matthews, Stahl.
Danault's back. Okay, so that makes sense.
Danault, Stahl. I think if Danault wasn't back, then I think you would see Kotkaniemi. But Kotkaniemi, he can play the physical game. He played the physical game against Pittsburgh in the playoffs and then first round against Philadelphia. So he can play that. But apparently he has played terribly down the stretch, Russ. He's played.
But again, this is what I don't like about bringing in a coach mid-season to a mostly veteran team, but also has a couple of key guys that you have to develop, because now basically Ducharme is doing the very easiest thing he can do. Let me move away the guys that I think need more development time, because this could cost me my job if we get bounced out of the first round. So I'm going to default to every veteran I have. And Eric Stahl has been horrible. And I don't even know why he's in the lineup. I honestly don't. Anytime I see him now, he is not the same Eric Stahl. Will the bell go off in the playoffs? Maybe, but I doubt it.
Yeah, it's purely experience. And Eric Engels followed that up with another note, and I don't know if we expected Jonathan Drouin to be back, but he confirmed that Drouin will not be back.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to.
So a team, and we'll get back to the actual games because this series doesn't start till Thursday. But a team, Joe, that down the stretch had trouble scoring goals, and Drouin was one of your more talented offensive players, and Caulfield, all he did was score goals in overtime down the stretch, and now both of those guys at the beginning of the series are not in the lineup.
Yeah, I don't hate sitting Caulfield.
No.
Scores. Show me something at 5-on-5. Honestly,
Right.
3-on-3 goals. Hey, great. I'm glad that he's able to excel there, but you got to do it at fives, man.
He did have a couple crossbars 5-on-5, but he didn't score. It's true,
right? So, right. but I don't know what I think expecting him to be your savior. Your late season acquisition was kind of foolish anyways. That's putting so much on his shoulders.
It is.
So to start, so that's fine. But I had, I predicted before Toronto in 3, very funnily, but I find it so hard with Montreal. I just don't see how they can put it together. I know every time we say this about them, they seem to pull a horseshoe out.
It'll be Carey Price. If Carey Price is at the top of his game, it'll be a series. And if he's not, it won't be.
I picked Toronto in 6 because Toronto traditionally makes it a lot tougher on themselves than they should, and I could see that happening. I think they'll overcome that because I think they're so deep, but I do think it's going to be I'm sort of giving this away because I'm sure we're going to be doing predictions on the north on tomorrow or on Thursday. But I don't see a way that the Habs can win, but I do see a way the Habs can make it difficult on Leaf fans. But stock up on your nitroglycerin pills, folks. Okay, getting back to Boston, Washington. The one thing that and Russ was right in Game 1 after Vanacek gets hurt, the Bruins did not test Anderson. And the core group, even Bruce Cassidy said after the game, our big guys didn't show up. Well, yesterday, Bergeron scored, Taylor Hall scored the tying goal late in regulation, and then Marchand with the fantastic one-timer on the Grizzly pass. So the big guys did show up, and they did test Anderson. They threw a lot of shots at him, Joe.
Yeah, and that's what you got to do. I mean, not only is he not fresh, but he's not game tested. I mean, he only got one game in the regular season, I think it was.
Yeah, post he's slow. He is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, he's 3
Yeah,
39 years old. I mean, he was the situation in goal for Washington has been so cursed. With Samsonov, the ATV thing last year, then the COVID twice. And then, Lundqvist ends up, not being able to suit up because of his heart issue. Yeah. All this stuff was just like, oh boy, okay. And then, Vanacek comes in and suddenly you're like, oh, we found somebody that can play here. We didn't think he would be in the NHL at all this year. And turns out he hung on okay. And, you just needed more insurance aside from having, 4 goalies, but yeah, I mean, they're asking too much of them, but the Bruins just pepper the net, drive the net, classic dirty areas stuff, and just throw a lot of rubber at them and see if that works out, because it probably should.
Joe, the one play that was smart was when they went right around the back of the net and got him to move to one post and commit, got the puck out to the middle. He could not get back. And the Capitals are killing themselves, trying to block shots, do anything they can to get in the way, because they know once he is committed, he can't get back. And if the Bruins do a few more of those plays, one wraparound a game, they're going to get a goal every time they do a wraparound. If they do it right.
The DeBrusque goal, he was out of the net so far out of position. It was like me playing floor hockey 20 years ago. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, so I mean, I think this series is going 7. But I mean, what we'll be curious is to see whether Samsonov gets back in, or they have to continue with Anderson, whether now with Eller injured, and we don't know what the status of him is, whether Kuznetsov comes back or if he remains in the doghouse, or if it's I don't even know if it's COVID protocol or if he's in the doghouse. I've heard both. So I don't know
which it is.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question. If Eller's out, Kuznetsov remains out, would you put a call into Connor McMichael?
Yeah, I was saying to Mike, absolutely. I wouldn't even hesitate. He got Player of the Week. I thought he'd be a factor already with them. I would use him without hesitation.
Okay. Okay. The Carolina Hurricanes and the Nashville Predators started their best of 7, and that game sort of took second fiddle to that Bruins Capitals game. I kept checking back to it, Russ, but it didn't really give me much. Didn't give me much of a thrill. I mean, I kept checking back to see what was going on. It was 2-2, and then all of a sudden the Canes turned it on. Now they ended up winning at 5-2, and I know that you had particular interest in UC Saros.
Yeah, because it was interesting. UC Saros can make the great save, right? What UC Saros did last night, though, was a reason he could never be my playoff goalie. He makes a great save. He's on the right side of the net. All of a sudden, he doesn't have the puck. The puck swings back around. Everybody's watching because they're like, hey, UC made a save. And Carolina's got the puck, and they shoot it in the net, and Saros is way out of position to even try and get a anywhere near blocking that shot. And my feeling is you made a great save, but the puck is still alive. You can't give up on the play like that. And this is what drives me crazy. He is going to give up 3 or 4 goals every game, no matter what. Carolina's offense isn't great. As a matter of fact, they were just looking to take shots at some points because Svechnikov, for whatever reason, doesn't have the magic right now. And Net just does, passing-wise. But they don't have any real offensive accelerants on that team right now. And their goaltending was okay. Ned Jelkovic was okay. But again, there was a goal that went off after Hakanpää's back, but it still was going high. And then Jelkovic was like this. He has problems with high pucks. And as the series goes on, and Nashville's probably not the team because Nashville is the worst team in the playoffs. I think that's not a stretch.
Right.
In saying that.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably going to try to do that to some degree, but the next round is going to be the tester for Carolina because as much as I like Ned Jelkovic, there are things that he does in his game right now that are not refined for the playoffs that I think will preclude this team from getting to the Stanley Cup. I do.
Joe, I was saying to Russ, I almost got the feeling yesterday that, because the conventional wisdom was they were going to go with Mrazek, and then all of a sudden game day, well, we might go with Nedeljkovic, and then they did. My thought was, okay, they think they can beat Nashville even with a rookie goaltender in there, so let's get him some experience against the team that we think we can beat to prepare him for the second round against either Tampa or Florida. That's what I thought the mindset of Brind'Amour might be. What did you think of this game?
Well, I think when it comes to the goaltending thing, I think they just want to make sure they're not getting Mrazek too much action because he came back fairly recently from being hurt.
Right.
So maybe you don't want to take a chance there, and then suddenly you're down and you're in the cap situation where if Ned Jelkovic goes down, then who's your number 3?
Well, you're going back to Mr. Clutch, James Reimer.
Yeah. So at least you got that going for you, but the thing that caught my eye last night was how the Caps offense was able to really bully Ekholm and Yossi around, and really take advantage of them. I was very surprised to see that, nonetheless, to say the least, because I love both of those defensemen. I think they're both tremendous defenders, but boy, Carolina gave them fits. Everybody hates plus minus, but those guys were -3. Like that's your difference in the game right there, and. To see them do that, obviously you get the matchup at home, but to have that matchup picked out already and to get it down correct is something else. And I'm opposite of Russ here because I do love Carolina's offense. I like that the skill guys they've got and the action they can create. I like that their bottom 2 lines can knock you around. I like that they have 2 scoring lines that can fill the net. So I'll
tell you a weakness. You want to know a weakness though, Joe?
Yeah.
I'm going to say shithead like Brad Marchand. I go right after Nino Niederreiter, who's got the shortest temper, quickest fuse of anybody, and he goes right in the box. He still has never learned from that. He really is good offensively, but this is a guy that will take a bad penalty at a moment's notice. They have that issue too.
Well, you know what? I think that's when you get a guy like Jordan Martinook to chase Marchand around instead. It's like, hey, leave Nino alone. Come deal with me.
Yeah.
Tom Wilson is the calm guy from the Progressive commercials compared to Nino Niederreiter. The third game last night was, and I will confess, I watched about 15 minutes of the first period of this game and was ready for slumber, and that was the Colorado Avalanche and the St. Louis Blues. Now the Avs won 4-1. I did watch the condensed game this morning, and Russ, I don't think it was Binnington's fault. The goal.
No, he was great early.
Yeah, I don't think he was bad in the entire game.
Right.
I think he was pretty good. The Makar shot was a seeing eye shot. The McKinnon goal, he didn't have a chance on. And I think the highlight of the game was the fight between Landeskog and Braden Shen. That was fantastic.
Yeah, Landeskog, it's an interesting thing. Couple things. So, like pregame, he did give an interview, and he's one of the most honest guys in hockey. And his interview was basically, hey, this 56-game season was a real grind. And he's one of the few that has actually admitted it, because usually hockey players just say, yeah, whatever, we'll play anything, any schedule, it doesn't matter. But he was honest about it. And that's why we're seeing injuries, because players are not used to this kind of scheduling. So that's one thing. Moving that aside, Cale Makar is the best defenseman in the playoffs. Like, he just is for any team, and it's a massive advantage for Colorado. I always say Sam Girard doesn't get enough exposure or credit because on any other team he would be a star, but there's Cale Makar, so he can't be. And McKinnon, is McKinnon. But St. Louis isn't a terrible team. They just aren't equipped to handle Colorado. They're just not. The only thing they could do is try and beat them up. If they can't do that, they can't catch them. They can't do anything unless Colorado's goaltending were abysmal. I don't even know if they're going to win a game. They might win one game.
Yeah, I have enough respect for Binnington to think that he can steal one.
I love Binnington, but there's so much else that Colorado dominates. That
No. I agree with you. I think that they're going to win this series. I picked them in 5. I just think that there is a way that St. Louis can win at least one game, and maybe, I think they're a physical enough team. I mean, you saw at the end of the game there was a little back and forth between the two teams physically, and I think that'll just get heated up. We're only a couple years away from the Blues winning a Stanley Cup. I know they're not the same team. They don't have Pietrangelo anymore, but a lot of the components that won the Cup are still there, Joe. So what's that?
They're not playing Romanov. Romanov is out for game 1. He's scratched.
Yeah, they're playing Kulak. Well,
wait, hold on. They're playing Brett Kulak.
Brett Kulak, and get this. We're going Leafs Habs again. They're splitting up, and this probably is because Weber can't play the minutes that I guess he's had a hand injury, but they split up Weber and Sherratt. Sherratt's on one pair with John Merrill, and I believe Weber is with Kulak. So it's so the
Habs really are going to try and beat up the Leafs. Like, I get that I like their roster with the physicality for the playoffs. I do. But like you said, you need some guys that can handle the puck and have speed and that can open things up. They have eliminated a lot of those guys via injury and scratches, and I don't get it.
Yeah. No, just going back to St. Louis and Colorado, Joe. I think that St. Louis can make this a series, but I don't think there's a chance they're winning this series. I think there's enough there that they can challenge Colorado, but not enough to actually beat Colorado.
Yeah, they need a lot of those guys from 2019 to step up again. I mean, Binnington facing 50 shots, he did everything he could. But you need O'Reilly to hulk up. You need Tarasenko to get something back here. I feel terrible for him after dealing with the shoulder injuries, and seems to have taken something out of him. He probably needs an off season to get recharged and not be hurt. But you need those guys to step up. I understand Landeskog beating the tar out of Shen. I mean, I totally get that for how the Blues wanted to start that up. But if you break this series down, the Blues are trying to do to Colorado what Montreal is going to try to do to Toronto. They're going to try to get physical with them, try to beat them up. But you know what? Can't hit what you can't catch. Colorado's got way too much speed. And Rantanen, I think, has had quietly one of the best seasons this year, and he and McKinnon just click like no other.
I mean, if Perron were playing, it would St. Louis would have a better chance, but not having Perron in game 1 was massive. I mean, he's been their best player down the stretch.
Well, the difference between these two series, one hasn't even started yet, and one, we just saw game 1. Colorado's power play is good to great.
Yeah, it's dead.
Toronto's power play is abysmal. It's been abysmal for the second half of the season, and that is why I think Montreal is sort of boning up for a physical series, because they can play that and take penalties with impunity. Because Toronto's power play hasn't scored. I mean, they're like 4 for the last 90 or something ridiculous like that. So that might be the plan of the Canadians: is okay, we'll take some penalties, but we'll knock a chunk out of Tavares and Marner and Matthews, and we won't get hurt for it because their power play won't score. So I don't know. I mean,
there is a factor with that. I also think that's where somebody like Colorado and Makar have an edge, because I've never seen Cale Makar fail on a power play when he's in charge of it at any level.
And by the way, the Leafs have mixed up their power play units. Rasmus Sandin has been on the top power play.
Yeah, because I understand why, I do understand why, and because sometimes you need a guy up there who doesn't have the, I don't want to say chokeability, but the fact that he doesn't have any bad baggage about how bad the power play was all year. His job is just to run the power play. He's got no previous preconceptions of this power play. That could be a positive for the Leafs because half the things that weigh down a power play are mental. Most power plays should be great in this league with the players that they have, but you could tell when and Joe knows this, when a power play goes bad, you feel what the guys are thinking and they're overthinking it, and especially the point guy. And if the point guy is not doing a good job, I could see why Sandy would
And Joe, you've covered the Leafs enough to know, and Morgan Riley has scored 20 goals in this league. He's a really good offensive defenseman, but the one aspect that's missing from his game, he doesn't have a boomer from the point. He's not doesn't have a big shot. He's a great distributor of the puck, and I think that what teams in any division right now, they learned more about their opposition because they played them so much this year. And everybody who looked at the Leafs power play at the beginning of the year saw that Riley was distributing to Marner and Matthews, and the power play flowed through them. And they were now in the second half, they're making the power play flow through Riley, and he really, he can't score from the point. So, that's why they've had a tough time scoring on the power play.
Yeah, and you know what? Without having a heavier shot up top, having that traffic in front, because I assume Toronto does the 1-3-1 power play setup. I think this is one where I know you need your forwards in close. I know you need them in close, but if you've got a forward that can really hammer the puck, I'd say swap Riley at the top with that player and try to work it out so that you can do it. You can tweak these things because obviously you've got 5-on-4 to deal with.
Right.
But I think Riley along the half wall is not a bad idea. Just you're kind of flipping the way that one side, that one flank has to flow with things, because you certainly don't want him going to the net and rotating around. But I think if you're able to get him into a spot where he can find clearer passes and get away from that spot at the point, they'll have a lot more success. Easy for me to say, both, watching from the outside and also not being a coach and not thinking that would and thinking it might work when it might actually be worse. Right. But that's what you have to deal with. I don't know if Sandin's the guy that has that kind of shot to help that out, but
he has a good shot. He actually does have a very
he has a better shot than Riley. But what I think, and I asked Sheldon Keefe this in the media availability today about, in the last couple of days in practice, what they've done is they've mixed in, like they're putting Simmons and Thornton on the number one power play with Marner and Matthews and Sandin. And then on the second power play, they've moved in, it's Tavares and Nylander and Hyman. And, so they've mixed it up, I think, to get that net front presence, to stir up something in front of the net, to create traffic.
Yeah, but Simmons isn't the net front guy that he used to be. He's not. But anything in terms of getting there, mucking it up in front of Price and obscuring his view. I mean, Russ, with that loaded first power play with Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, Marner, and Riley, nobody's in front of the net. They're expecting to go back and forth and try to get one-timers. That's true. That's true.
All right, getting off Leafs in Montreal. Sorry about that, but the news carried us.
Don't worry about it. They still got time. We still have Vancouver games to watch.
You just blew my.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, great. We have 4 barn burners tonight. First of which is Calgary, Vancouver. Joe, aren't you just excited to watch that game?
No.
I just don't understand why they did not forfeit these games.
This is like watching Slapshot 2 or any other
Slapshot 3.
That went straight to video. That wasn't even in the movie theater. So whatever.
The only interest I have in these games is watching how Travis Green handles the what could be the end of his road. Because for me, he's a guy, if he doesn't go back to Vancouver, if I'm Kevin Adams, I'm calling him. Because he knows how to make the most of a crappy situation. He did it in Utica. Those Utica teams he coached were not filled with any kind of big talent, and he coached them up like crazy. He did such a good job with them, and doing it at the NHL level is a lot harder, especially when you've got a GM who's lost in the water, and ownership has got high intensity. But Green's a guy that I really wanted them to try to get in on a couple of years ago, but there was no way Vancouver was going to let him go.
No, and the interesting dynamic there in Vancouver right now is I was listening to Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick on 31 Thoughts, and they were talking about all the news coming out of Vancouver where, all of a sudden now Benning's, they were expecting Benning to come back, and the fans are not happy about that. The question regarding Green and his contract, as you were talking about, bringing in Jeff Courtnall to be sort of like a not an overseer, but he has a good relationship with the Aquilinis, and him as a sounding board to decide where they're going to go.
They brought in Trevor Linden at one point to do the same thing.
Right. I don't get where that organization
he is overseeing the search, Mike, because they're gonna look at other coaches for sure. And he is going to be at the precipice of that.
Yeah. Dick Cheney was brought in to search for the vice president, and it ended up being Dick Cheney. So,
do we really have to mention Dick Cheney? Really?
Sorry, it was a historical reference that was sitting right there, Russ.
Okay, but the thing about the Jeff Courtnall thing is, the more things change in Vancouver, the more they stay the same, and that is because ownership wants to run it a certain way, and until they stop running it that certain way, you're going to keep. You might get a little further each time based on some of the talent that you got in the draft, but it always is still going to come back to signings, contracts, and these are big things that they have screwed up over the years. Length of contracts, bad trades. They've had some good ones too. Don't get me wrong, but that's what's really killed that.
No. I think Benning's first round draft record has been
first round, yes.
First round. But the signings of guys like Jay Beagle and Sven Barchi, Antoine Roussel, Brandon Sutter. Just bad money.
Tyler Myers.
Just bad.
It's not hard to find them. There's a whole litany of them.
Yeah, and now they're gonna
Erickson. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting with more examples.
and the thing is now they're probably going to be forced to signing bridge deals to Quinn Hughes and Pedersen because they can't afford to sign him to long-term deals. So in the end, that's not a great thing. So okay, 3 real games tonight, 3 real playoff games tonight. First one being Islanders Penguins. Islanders won in overtime. Game 1 on a Kyle Palmieri goal. Joe, the status of Malkin is in question. The status of Brian Dumoulin is in question, and the status of whether it's Ilya Sorokin or Semyon Varlamov in net. To the point that Barry Trotz said, "Well, I'll guarantee you one thing: a Russian is starting in goal tonight."
Love Barry. That's very kind of him to really clear the air with that one. Yes, but those aren't the goalies I'm worried about. The goalie I'm worried about is Tristan Jarry, and I love that I went out of my way before the season to say I think Pittsburgh's toast. I don't think they're making the playoffs, and they proved me wrong by winning the stinking division. And they get in the playoffs, and I'm like, all right, fine, Pittsburgh. I believe in you. You can win it. And now they come out and just get jarred out of that game, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Like everything that I worried about this team before the season is starting to come out now in the playoffs, which is perfect when you make predictions on things.
You know what though, Joe? The one thing is he was jarred on the long shots, right? They all went high glove. Everything in the crease down low, he was great. He actually made some spectacular saves too in that game.
And the game winner was unstoppable.
No, that was unstoppable. There was this much to shoot at. I don't think Palmieri makes that shot most of the time ever. So I honestly think there are some things that were fixable there for Jarry, just to play a little bit better. If he plays a little bit better, we're talking. But if I'm Barry Trotz, I have to play Varlamov. If there's a reason to pull him, then there's a reason to pull him. But if all of a sudden you shelve Varlamov and Sorokin's your guy, you are going down a bad path early in these playoffs because Sorokin is the guy more prone to have a problem in the playoffs than Varlamov. And if he does have that problem and you go to Varlamov and then you find out, Varlamov has now rested too much because he's not used to being the guy coming in off the bench, you may now have screwed up that nice little tandem that you had going. And I think that's a big risk. I throw Varlamov in there first. He's your number one.
And that, I mean, I was stunned that he didn't play in game one, honestly. But
he has that little knee issue, Joe. He did. So maybe they said, okay, you know what? We know his injury history. We're going to let this game go for him so he could be really good.
Well, in that case, wouldn't you be, I guess if you're the Islanders, wouldn't you be encouraged, though, that you're able to pull that one out, even with
Absolutely. And
even
that's
with
why
Sorokin?
I go back to the number one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I would be hesitant if I'm Trotz to say, okay, we know Varlamov has the knee issue. It's, it's barking at him. So, okay, we tell Varlamov, as soon as Sorokin loses a game, you're back in. But he won, so we have to keep him in. We'll keep him in for game two. If he loses game two and it's 1-1 going back to New York, then we'll put you in there. But all you're doing is buying him time and giving him more time for his knee to not feel bad.
No, but it was only a slight thing. So I do think he is probably as close to 100% as anybody is this time of the year. But the idea is, if you don't do this, then basically Trotz is saying, I kind of think Sorokin's my number one now, which is fine if that's the way he wants to go. But Varlamov is not used to coming off the bench. That's my basic point here. He's not.
Well, Joe, it's nice to have options, and unfortunately, Sullivan does not have that option because
he doesn't.
So Casey DeSmith missed practice yesterday. I don't know for what reason, but that just illustrates that they're going to go back to Jari for game two. But if Jari
they have no choice,
right? If Jari loses game two, I mean, do you go to Casey DeSmith? I think you're riding Jari until the end of the series, no matter what.
Yeah, they've kind of painted themselves into that corner, honestly. And if I don't know if DeSmith was dealing with an injury thing that happened in practice or what have you, but they don't have anybody behind them, and it's that's. I mean, listen, I said before the season, teams needed to have 3 goalies, because of how condensed the schedule was. And how injuries were going to be a factor. If you didn't have 3 guys you could trust, you're going to have a rough time. And in the Penguins' case, they're having a rough time because I don't even know who Pittsburgh's third is. I
think he's a Finnish goalie.
Yeah, I think it's a Finnish guy. But that's the worst case scenario for them is that if Jari can't get it done and they got to look to somebody else and DeSmith can't go. Boy, they're asking a lot out of Sid and company to
I do
get
think
things
Malkin
done.
and Dumoulin are going to go, though. I just have a feeling.
Emil Larmi.
That's right. Okay. I would never have gotten that in a million years if you gave me 1,000 hours to remember it. I would not have.
Okay. Now, the second game is one I'm going to pay a lot of attention to because game one was just so fantastic, and that was Tampa Bay and Florida. Joe, I don't agree with the suspension to Bennett. I didn't think it was worthy of a one-game suspension, especially in the playoffs. I think he got suspended more for the situation than he did for the actual hit because it was in response to Coleman hitting Barkov, so it was retribution. And I think the league is sending the message, okay, you responded to the hit, so this was not just in the play. It was, okay, you targeted Coleman and you hit him, so we're going to suspend you for a game for that.
Yeah, he had a lot of ice to be able to pull up and not do that too. I mean, he took a run at him. I mean, it's not like he came, from 1,000 feet away to run a guy into the boards. He didn't, but all things given, he was definitely saying, "I'm putting this guy in the glass."
Why did he do it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Why do it? I mean,
why he did it.
We know why he did it. So, I mean, okay.
That's the
you gotta eat it then,
That's the slippery slope of bad refereeing. Now, when you try and be a good teammate, you get screwed.
Well, I know everybody's mad that McDonough didn't get a equal suspension,
that was an evil hit.
It was evil, but knowing how player safety looks at these things, they probably saw that more in the flow of play because it was more on the play than say the Bennett Coleman hit was. So they're just kind of like, well, we got to give a little ground here. But I mean, listen, you don't flatten a guy from behind into the board, especially the dasher, for crying out loud, break a guy's face open. Yeah. I mean, That you just don't.
But here's the other thing. The other thing is now Joe Quenneville's playing games again because he's got Dreger in practice as coming out as the number one goalie. Mm-hmm. And I am not saying he's the number one goalie until I see who's actually in goal. Could he make the switch? Sure. But again,
should he?
No, I don't think he should yet because the minute you do, you've lost Bob for the series. And so you have to let Bob try and clean up his game even a little more than last game, which wasn't a bad game for him. Mm-hmm. Again, I think it's a losing series for Florida anyhow. But if you do have a chance of winning, it's probably going to be with Bob playing like a Vezina goalie than Dreger playing better than we think he could play.
Yeah, this series, I mean, it completely changed adding Kucherov and Stamkos into this. Before, without them, it's even. And I think you give an edge to Florida. But with those two in, forget it. Like you just Kucherov was an immediate impact player in game one.
Yeah, and the power play was insane.
Well, right. Like you're not stopping him on the power play. And like that changes the whole aspect of that team.
All right. Well, I got Mr. Softy coming. Can we end the show? I hear him.
Okay. Well, briefly, Minnesota.
Not Mr. Dingaling. Come on.
No Cookie Puss. No Carvel. Minnesota, Vegas. I thought was a fairly boring 1-0 overtime victory on Joe Eriksson X goal. Game 2 tonight. I don't see any reason that they would, they're not putting Leonard in for Fleury. It's going to be Fleury. It's going to be Talbot. Joe, the only thing I wonder is whether Talbot can equal the effort that he showed in game 1. I don't think he can, but if he does, then Minnesota has a chance to win another game.
I don't know. Talbot's played pretty damn well the last couple of months.
I've seen him since the Rangers. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he played outstanding in that game. And listen, you called it a boring game, but if you're a goalie fan, if you're just a fan of goaltending, you love that game because both guys were bananas in that one. I mean, Fleury's highlights were all over the place, and Talbot very quietly stopping 43, 44 shots. Come on, like that's a busy night for those guys. But yeah, I mean, if Talbot can equal that. And I'm not saying he can't, but what's like looking back at what Vegas did in the playoffs last year, they don't go to the net. Like they don't drive the net. They don't try to create traffic. They got plenty of guys that can do that. They just don't. And it's baffling. I don't understand why they don't do that. I mean, I know you want to score off the rush. It's fun and exciting. But holy smokes, man, playoffs, you gotta get in there. And I'm not saying
I used to have these weird conversations, right? Because I always felt like Brian Boyle should be this guy that would go to the net. And I remember interviewing him 2 or 3 times as a Ranger, and he'd be like, yeah, we have to go to the net more. But he wouldn't do it. Like, he would say it. He knew what the right thing was. They say it.
Brian, you're 6'7". Go to the net.
Stand in front of the goalie.
But you know what those conversations are like, Joe, and it's just it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. Yeah. And but like Vegas, they went through this in the playoffs exactly like the exact same thing last year, and everybody was like, "Geez, I can't believe they lost." And I'm like, "Look at the shots they're taking. Look at everything they're doing on offense. None of those shots are quality at all." And same thing this time. I mean, it's 43, 44 shots, but where was Talbot supremely tested? I mean, yes, he made a couple of good stops, but I mean, goodness gracious, it's not like he had to pull Fleury stuff out of his.
So the last thing, Mike, we did just see some news.
Yeah. I was just going to.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll discuss this more tomorrow, but the Red Wings just announced that they've extended Jeff Blashill.
This is surprising.
I'm a little surprised. I mean, maybe it's the fact that they really couldn't find. I mean, they're a disaster right now. They're 2-3 years from being a good team, and maybe. Blashill was open to continuing going down this road, whereas trying to get another coach to be open to doing that would be tough. So I know Wings fans are not going to be happy with that. No. They're going to be very upset.
All right.
But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thanks to Joe Yerdon for coming on. Always a pleasure, Joe.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.